You must have heard it too, as soon as you start talking about public opinion in Russia, and people answer without hesitation. Like, what are you talking about? Most Russians support both the war and Putin. This thesis has become so firmly established in everyday life that is repeated both in television interviews and in private conversations. Without thinking, can we do it all wrong? Maybe official sociology is lying the same way the propaganda does, and if yes, then how are the support indicators inflated? And what are the real numbers? Can sociology in today's Russia be honest at all? I'm Oleksii Matsuka, and right now I will try to answer all these questions. To begin with, the official data. Most Russians support the war in Ukraine according to the polls by Russian public opinion research centers. There are actually only two large and reputable ones: the Russian Public Opinion Research Center and Public Opinion Foundation, whose main customer for social research is, who would you think? Yes, the administration of the President of Russia. The data of both centers are not very different. A week after the invasion, VTSIOM reported that 71% of the polled Russians support the so-called special military operation and 21% don't support it. FOM data, of course, are similar. 65% of Russians considered the Kremlin's decision correct and 17% considered it wrong. After a prolonged break, 6 months after the start of a full-scale war, an update appears on the VTSIOM website. They indicated that support remains consistently high in the range of 70–73%. And if you look at how sociologists themselves commented on this, then the main message is that the numbers are inflated.
Alexander III said that Russia had only two allies, the army and the navy. Today's Russian Federation also has only two allies left, the missile forces on the one hand and the FOM with VCIOM on the other. Oleksii Titkov, sociologist.
It's noteworthy that after September, when a successful counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kharkiv region took place, both sociological centers stopped publishing data on the level of support for the war in Ukraine altogether. They obviously take measurements, transmit data to the Kremlin, but sociology is all closed. To understand the real mood, Russian opposition activist Oleksii Matsuka launched his own research project, Chronicles, which conducts opinion polls and analyzes data from social networks. According to the resource, last summer there was a turning point. If in mid-May 64% of respondents supported the war, a high figure but also different from the official one, then in early June already 55%. Every second respondent said no to war. By October, the figure had slipped to 51%. How do court sociologists wind up the numbers? It turned out that they don't even need to lie. The wording of the question itself greatly affects the result. The Kremlin calls the war a special military operation, explosions in Russia, popes, financial losses due to sanctions, negative economic growth. It seems the same, but people perceive it differently. Just imagine, people are asked, do you feel the rise in prices and the financial crisis? Or does the negative growth of the economy cause you concern? In the first case, most of the answers are yes. In the second, until a person understands what exactly they're asking him about, until he understands what the essence of the question is, many will say, I don't know, or no, to sociologists without hesitation on the go. So here too, VTSIOM asked people, do you support the decision to conduct a special military operation of Russia in Ukraine?
It would seem a neutral question, but it is not neutral, because if you ask, do you support the already adopted decision on a special military operation, then you will receive different answers. Then you would ask, how do you feel about the same special military operation? Further, if you ask about special military operation, it will be one question, and if you ask about the military invasion of Ukraine or about the war against Ukraine, it will be a completely different question too. Oleksii Matsuka, Associate Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Exeter.
Second trick. In polls conducted by pro-government sociologists, people are often offered only categorical answers, yes or no, and I don't know. There is no rather for you, or maybe yes, no gradations. And according to Open Democracy resource, these answers weed out a lot of people who hesitate. A simple example. The St. Petersburg Independent Center for Social Research Russian field conducted the same survey, but gave people not 3 but 5 response options, including I rather approve and I rather disapprove. And it turned out that clearly approves of the war only every third respondent and not 70–80%.
Questioning is a craft. FOM and VCIOM have their hands full. They are professionally engaged in this. They have just a task, so to speak. They don't fake anything directly, but I think that they have certain limitations related to their proximity to Russian government agencies. Oleksii Matsuka, Associate Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Exeter.
In addition to surveys on the subject of the war, Russian sociologists also found out people's opinions about the status of the occupied territories. And here again the same trick. 2 days before the invasion, the FCOM question was worded as follows: please tell me, do you support the president's decision to recognize the independence of the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics or not? Obviously, the question itself prompts the answer yes. And this is tricky: support or not? And posing the question, when you don't agree, then you are against Putin. And here it's worth asking the question, are honest opinion polls possible in principle in modern Russia? First, contrary to the picture portrayed by Russian state media, public opinion is never monolithic and unified. It's like a well-known joke about the average temperature in the hospital. And according to the sociologist, professor at the European University in St. Petersburg, Mikhail Sokolov, among the opponents of the special operation, there are disproportionately more young people, especially those who are under 30. In addition, in big cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg, this disapproval is even stronger.
If you are under 30, live in a big city, have a college degree, and don't watch TV, there's an 80% chance that you don't support the actions of the Russian military. Mikhail Sokolov, sociologist, professor at the European University at St. Petersburg.
At the same time, in the group of people of retirement age, almost 9 out of 10 will support the war, the Russian field agency found out. Here the situation is quite simple. Older people have been getting most on their information from TV for years, and you yourself understand what they are being taught there. The fight against NATO is approaching the borders of Russia and wants to surround it with the military bases and so on. Everything has also been done so that the current war and the Second World War in general merge in the minds of many. In addition, older people tend to share the Soviet nostalgia cultivated in Russia and feel emotional attachment to the regime.
The people who live in Russia, especially the older generation, have a Soviet consciousness, a conservative one. They feel threatened by digital culture, McDonald's, free sexual relations and something else. It is very difficult to rationalize it, but it is in the minds of people, and it is very easy to wind up fictions like NATO or Ukrainian aggression on it. No matter how strange it may sound, the desire to recreate what happened in the past, for example the USSR or the Iron Curtain, Putin, is a kind of creative discourse for them. Konstantin Eisenberg, author of the sociological study Russians in the context of the special military operation.
Young people, on the contrary, watch YouTube, read Telegram and foreign online media. After all, a quarter of Russians already use VPNs.
This is the part of Russian society that was less dependent on the state, was critical of the Russian authorities, voted against the amendments to the constitution in 2020, supported the opposition and went out to protest in 2021. These people fit better into the global world. They went on vacation to Europe. They had a better attitude towards the West. Denis Volkov, sociologist, director of the Levada Center.
Here it's also important to understand that the study of public opinion in wartime in Russia is problematic in principle. A week after the invasion of Ukraine, the Duma adopted a law on punishment for disseminating false information about the actions of the Russian military. Now imagine a stranger comes up on the street and even worse calls, because some of the surveys are telephones, ask you the attitude to Ukraine, to military operations. Not everyone dares to give a frank answer, and how then to trust the results?
I would do anonymous and in-depth interviews when we ask people about their position very gently, carefully, unobtrusively, without offering them concrete alternatives. And people say what they think. I can't trust any of the numbers right now, because I know there's an absolutely out-of-order sample. Irina Kosterina, Russian sociologist.
There is, it turns out, one more thing. Those who refuse to answer are not taken into account by sociologists at all. So it turns out that this is not a poll of Russians, but in fact a poll of those Russians who agree to answer. Those who against the government or against the war remain silent. Those who say yes to the regime happily communicate with sociologists.
We get the data as the very specific Russian think, who for some reason agreed to answer the questions. Most likely these will be people loyal to the current government, very patriotic. Why should we be afraid? We are for Putin, we are for the Russian world, we are for a strong Russia. Irina Kosterina, Russian sociologist.
And here the alternative figures that Navalny's anti-corruption foundation are indicative, just for comparison. So the number of Russians who consider the course of the war successful for Russia is only 14%. In fact, only 1 in 10. 2/3 said to the oppositionists that they want peace talk, or only a third of those polled are in favor of continuing the war. And yet, 41% refused to answer the question at all, whether they expected that the war would go on for so long. People are just afraid to say it, even anonymously. Thus, both experts and sociologists themselves agree that any research in Russia is now meaningless, because people are afraid and tell lies. For those who are against the war, it's easier to remain silent. For those who hesitate, it's easier to join the majority. There is only one unequivocal conclusion that can be drawn: the official figures about mass support of the regime simply cannot be trusted. It's clear that public opinion is greatly influenced by the situation at the front line, what to prepare for, what are the prospects for the Ukrainian counteroffensive. When will it be? We will talk about all this in the videos. Thank you for watching and see you soon.